everyone. I was just having a technical difficulty with my iPad here, so I'm just gonna get set up a little bit closer so we can all join in. So welcome if this is your first live event with the Facebook group Women Healing from Emotional Abuse with Power, Passion, and Pleasure. I'm Ailsa Kepi. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to our live event for this week, which is all about, according to your vote, we voted, there was a kind of a tie, but it's all about how your childhood coping mechanisms that you developed very young have become inner saboteurs to you as an adult. And so, you know, this is something that's worth looking at, because sometimes we're sabotaging ourselves all the time and we don't even know we're doing it because it's subconscious and we've just created these patterns from a long time ago. So I wanted to really bring this up. It might come across as a little bit hard to take, especially if you're used to blaming other people and blaming your life circumstances and blaming everything outside of yourself for what's going on in your life, then this might be a little bit of a different perspective. It's not taking away the fact that there are, you know, abusive people out there and that there are really difficult life circumstances that we have to go through. It's not taking away from that at all, but it's looking at what is our part in that and what about ourselves is attracting that kind of energy and those kind of experiences into our life. Because I would imagine none of us want to stay in that kind of abusive situation. None of us want to keep holding on to those effects of abuse afterwards. So, with that being said, I thought we'd look at some of the common coping patterns that children do, have, because, you know, to be honest, none of us have had perfect families, or at least I haven't, and, you know, there's always room for improvement, and, you know, our parents do the best they can, whoever was our caretakers, but, you know, sometimes that's just, you know, it's not going to meet all of our needs. So when we go back and look at some of these childhood patterns, which, you know, another thing reason that I wanted to bring it up now was that we're moving into, if you keep up with the astrological calendar at all, we're moving into the sign of Aries. So if you guys, any of you were born in April or the end of March, April, and you're in Aries, that's the sign of new beginnings. It's also the sign of the inner child. So it really does bring up any of these patterns as well. So as we move into that, these patterns may be accentuated. So it's even more important to be really aware of what's going on. And Aries is the sign of the self and your personal identity. So how do you identify with yourself? And what are your inner needs that are driving what's going on for you now? So I'm just going to throw out there a couple of really common ones, just see if this relates to you at all. So as a child, a lot of us didn't get all the attention that we would have wanted in the way that we wanted. So that need for attention is a fundamental need. We all need attention and love and support. And as a child, you would expect to get that from your caregiver. And if that wasn't forthcoming in all the ways that you needed, you can kind of internalize that. And as you get older, you kind of become addicted to drama and addicted to creating drama because you have this need for attention, which, you know, there's nothing wrong with wanting attention. However, if you internalize that and as you get older, you don't look at that program, your need for attention that's perfectly legitimate, we all have it, becomes kind of a drama queen. Like we create drama around us because we want to have that attention. We're craving attention. Now, does it work very well when we're older? Not so much. As you probably know, many, you can see the drama queens out there all the time. They're creating this whirlwind of stuff that goes on with them because really they're looking for attention. So that's one pattern that is really common that we bring with us from childhood. Another one is the belief that as a child, nobody understands us. I remember thinking that every once in a while, and you start believing that as a child, no one understands you. I'm different. No one gets me, whatever. And that's a child. You can hear kind of the child voice saying that. And so, it's, again, there's nothing wrong with that belief as a child. But if you kind of, again, are just like internalizing that and not really looking at that as you get older, we might kind of have a reluctance to communicate, maybe. We have a fear of judgment if we say what we want, say what we mean, if we talk, say anything about true feelings about ourselves. We were like, oh, nobody understands me. And that nobody understands me, you can even see, like, I went into kind of a like teenage little mode there. Nobody understands me. And that is what we bring into our adult life. And then when we're trying to have good relationships, if you're coming from that subconscious belief, well, nobody's going to understand me anyway, what's the point? You can see how that would very, very quickly become an issue with communication. So those are a couple, just to throw out there, a couple of those kind of patterns that we pick up as kids. And they're coping mechanisms. I mean, as a kid, we don't get perfectly what we want all the time, and we learn to self-soothe, we learn to cope, we learn to survive. And these kind of beliefs that we internalize, really do get carried on. So it's a good time if your life is not going the way you want it, and if you're, maybe, like I've said in previous videos, the women that end up being in abusive relationships are very strong, very gifted, very caring women. And, we are not living our full potential if we are not really looking at all this stuff. And how can we heal? How can we parent ourselves? How can we give ourselves what we need so that we can actually break free of all these old patterns that aren't serving us anymore? So that was kind of one thing I wanted to just bring up. And there's actually, interestingly, some research about our brain and how it works with this whole self-esteem and this whole kind of sense of self that we're looking at. And the part of our brain that deals with our sense of self is kind of in the prefrontal cortex, and it's the higher brain, okay? It's not back in the reptilian brain, which some of it, a lot of our reactions and things are lower down in the brainstem. But our sense of self, our identity, and how we see ourselves is a higher brain function. And what they've studied is that for you to have a really good sense of self and a good sense of self-esteem, you have more connectivity, so there's more white matter, there's more stuff going on, connections in the brain between your reward center, so you're hoping for rewards, your positivity center, and your sense of self. There's really good connections between those parts of your brain. So, neuroplasticity, which is a fancy term for saying we can create more connections in our brain when we work with that. So this is another thing to know, that we're not stuck in these patterns. Like, if we haven't had certain needs met, we're not stuck forever in those ways. It may take some work, because now you're going down, it's like, instead of going for a walk in the woods and going on the really big groomed path that everybody's gone on, that's like your super highway, and in your brain, it's like the pathway that your negativity, your low self-esteem, like you've just grooved these down to they're smooth, they're easy. Your brain knows how to connect those. But if you want to set up different connections, like more hopeful, more positive, have self-esteem, they may be like crashing through the underbrush for the first few times or many times until you create new pathways. So this is an important thing to remember. We're not going to find it easy to think in a different way, to understand in a different way, and to act and live in a different way until we've created these new pathways. So it's good to be aware of that. And like I was talking about in past videos as well, about the comfort, we're not going to feel comfortable in this new way of thinking. And just a side point, I thought this was super interesting since a lot of you have been talking about narcissists and the abuse that you've suffered being with a narcissistic personality. They've studied the brains of narcissists, and they found that they actually have a decreased sense of connectivity between their reward center and their sense of self. So narcissists actually are really going for that dopamine hit of wanting to be acknowledged, wanting to be seen as being superior and amazing and attention. Like, they want that because they have even less than the normal amount of connections there. So that's just an interesting side note that, their brain connectivity is actually different. And they, if you have at least enough awareness to know that you want to create new pathways, you're already a step ahead. You've already got the possibility of all of that change there. So you're a step ahead in that sense. So this is how you would sort of build a sense of self-worth with that. So the last piece that I wanted to kind of look at today too was the kind of bottom-up approach that I use in my 8-week program that I have mentioned a few times. I have an 8-week online coaching program for women that are recovering from emotional abuse and helping to repattern the brain and the body and your life and your relationships and to learn new skills. This is what this program is about, and it works from the bottom up, which in the way that I'm using it means that sometimes you look at what's being held in the body. You look at where are you holding on to these old patterns in the body too? Because it's one thing to understand cognitively in your head, okay, I get, how this works. It's another thing that, in your body, you could still be holding on to some of these childhood patterns, and the body just habitually goes back to those postures or those tightnesses or that pain. And as long as you're doing that, it's really hard to override that and come up with any new kind of pattern, because your body keeps taking you back into the old patterns. So I work, the reason that I work so much with the body is that it really is a key to shifting some of this stuff. And when you shift things in your body, you can actually shift the mental patterns, the brain pathways, and everything. So let me just ask you if you are aware at all of a specific sensation in your body, say when you're feeling kind of like you're not getting any attention, and you really have been doing everything for all these people, and you're just not getting attention. And if you just sit with that emotion, that feeling of how that feels, and notice where that sits in your body, like when I think about not getting the attention that or the value, people aren't noticing what I'm doing, I can feel all this tightening up. I can kind of feel myself kind of having to kind of hold myself up, kind of on guard, kind of nobody else is going to do it, so I'm going to have to kind of muscle through. So I can feel all of this tension through here. So if you've noticed something about your body, then see how that works. And then notice if you let go of that tension and then see if you notice a switch in your brain as far as, what you're feeling or in your body. Because as soon as I let go of the tension in my shoulders, I kind of, it's almost like forget, release whatever, all that feeling of, ugh, it's all on me, I have to shoulder everything. And as soon as I kind of let go of that tension, it's like, oh, well, maybe it's not too bad. And it's not that it changes anything externally. And again, I just want to emphasize, I am not saying that, you know, relaxing your shoulders is going to fix your entire life right away. What I am saying, though, is that learning how your body gives you messages and learning to have some awareness of how you position your body can help bring that new emotional feeling, which will lead to you acting in a different way, you talking in a different way, you living in a different way, which filters down into your actual life. So that's what I noticed right away, is just, you know, relaxing my shoulders, and I kind of feel like, oh, that tension is gone. I take a deep breath. The other thing to try is, you know, I think this is fairly common, but, you know, if you're feeling particularly stressed or whatever, actually, you know, putting your hands up and going, woo, you know, getting all excited about that, and doing an action with your body that counteracts, like, is the feeling that you would like to be feeling, maybe, instead of the one that you are feeling. Just doing the actual action with your body can it just changes that switch in your body mind and starts helping you feel a little bit of a different emotion. So it's like, you know, if I'm feeling particularly tired and draggy today, and I'm like, wow, this is an awesome day, and I'm feeling good, and you just kind of go for it. And then you kind of go, oh, actually, I do feel a little better. And, you know, just to notice those things. You have control over a lot of the way that you feel most of the time. And we don't use these clues in our body and these ways of just shifting ourselves. So, again, in my program, we delve much more deeply into all of these connections with how our body can really lead us into more understanding and more confidence and more self-esteem, and how we can really lay down all these pathways. So I just wanted to bring up that fact as well. So again, just as far as today, you know, I really just wanted to bring up the fact that a lot of the times we have these similar patterns that we have habitually lived in and embodied. We've actually put them in our body, these kind of patterns, from a very, very young age. And I guess I'll finish with just kind of a personal anecdote, a personal story of my own realization about this. And this was that I didn't have a horrible childhood, but I did feel that I couldn't really be myself. I didn't get the attention I wanted, and maybe my feelings weren't validated the way that I would have liked. And this was from a very young age. So when I think about how old I was when I felt like that, really young, like as long as I can remember. And what happened is I kind of split off into hiding and kind of numbing out my real feelings because they weren't kind of accepted. And I created a fantasy life of where I was given everything that I thought I wanted. So it was kind of this prince in shining armor. They were going to take me away, and I would, you know, be loved and seen, and I would, you know, be beautiful and all the things that I wanted. And so I kind of really split those two in my own personality. And in doing that, I realized as I grew older that having this split was really working against me, and I sabotaged myself completely. I ended up marrying a narcissist who fit what I thought my fantasy was. So he was kind of like the prince in shining armor, and he, you know, fit a lot of those tickets that I had in my head split off and made this whole fantasy life. So when I met him, I was drawn in completely because that side of me that was not connected to my real feelings or my real self. This was my fantasy that I had created as a kid. This was my coping mechanism. So I created this, and it allowed me to end up marrying and living for, 18 years with this narcissist. And, realizing that I'd done that, it was a slow kind of process for me of working through getting back to what were my real feelings about this, and how do I, bring myself kind of back together. So for myself, that, in my coping mechanism as a kid of not being recognized and not being validated and not being seen, I created this kind of fantasy life, which meant that when I was living over here, I wasn't connected to my real self at all, and I wasn't connected to my inner wisdom, my inner guidance, my knowing, my intuition. I just was seeing the fantasy. And so I don't know if that resonates with any of you guys. A lot of similar stories are coming out on the group. And again, I want to thank everyone for such vulnerable shares. I really, really hold all of you in my heart. And I hope that we have created together, and that I'm holding space in a sacred way for you to feel safe, and that you can share your story and find some community and some validation, and maybe even some healing here in the group. Again, I'm going to post my link. I am available for breakthrough calls. These are free. If you are interested in, if you think that my 8-week program might be what you're looking for, it might take you from feeling stuck and numbed out and not sure where to turn and not sure how to connect with yourself. In 8 weeks, we get to a place where you have all these skills: how to understand your body, how to find your own inner guidance system, how to build self-confidence, how to really understand what your story was, and all of those things. In 8 weeks, really intense work, you can move really far and come out the other end feeling ready to take life on in a new way. So if that calls to you at all, please book a breakthrough call with me. They are free, like I said, and we'll get on the phone for like 45 minutes, and we'll talk about your particular story and what that's like for you. What is it costing you to stay stuck in all of these old patterns, and how much do you really want to shift those? So again, I'll put my link underneath. Feel free to get in touch with me by messenger or through the group. I would love to speak to you, and hopefully this was kind of interesting for some of you. If you guys have any childhood patterns that you've noticed, please share them. We'd love to hear about your experience and stuff that you guys have been working through. There's some, all levels of people in different stages of healing in this group, so feel free to share. There'll be no judgment, of course, and we will look forward to hearing and talking to you all soon. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a great day.